Hello and welcome to the Oakland County Megacast. I'm Tyler Keefe alongside Ronnie Dahl in the studios of Civic Center TV and 89.3 Lakes FM. In addition today, as always, we're on 88.1 WBFH The Biff and also on Comcast Channel 15 and AT&T Channel 99 on Birmingham Area Municipal Access. Today on the web, as always, civiccentertv.com. Watch us on our Watch Live page or our small live player on our homepage each and every day, live 10 a.m. until 12 noon. And, of course, today we're joined by a Facebook partner, and our Facebook partner today via Facebook Live is the Greater West Bloomfield Chamber of Commerce. We thank Suzanne Levine, Vito Kakuru, and their entire team over at the West Bloomfield Chamber of Commerce for joining us on today's edition of the Oakland County Megacast. And, as always, joining me in the Lakes FM studios is Ronnie Dahl.
Happy Wednesday.
Yes, happy Wednesday, Ronnie.
I woke up today and I was thinking, is it Friday?
It felt like it's later in the week. It does kind of feel like it's a little later on.
Oh my goodness gracious. Rainy, dreary out there today, but at least the weather is warmer. I hope everyone got the opportunity to get outside yesterday because it really felt like spring.
Yeah, it felt great outside yesterday. It was really nice and warm, but not like humid or anything or groggy. It was beautiful sunset. Really nice day outside yesterday, and you know, to have a 70-degree day in March, yeah, we'll take that. It's a nice little preview of what's to come.
We will definitely take it. So we were outside yesterday. Tyler, I will say sometimes you miss living in an apartment because when you own a house, there's so much work that comes along with owning that house. So we have a gazebo in the backyard, and then we take down the top every winter time because of the snow, and then we have to put it back up in the spring, and it's always just such a challenge. And when you're a couple, it can make for some good conversation.
I would imagine so. I mean, yeah, you got to maintain that. You got to maintain your yard and your front yard, try to make it presentable for your neighbors and all that. It's a lot different than living in an apartment where all that external stuff is being done by the owners of the property.
And one thing I don't understand about where I live is we have an HOA fee, and it's like $125 a month. It's not cheap. We don't have a pool or playground or anything to upkeep, but it does not include mowing our lawns. They mow the common area, but not our lawns. And when I was on the board, I was always fighting for that. And especially because now it seems like every year our dues are going up. When we first bought our house, they were only $25 a month. Now they're up to like $125. And I feel like, hey, just mow the lawns because we all have such small lawns. It doesn't take a lot, but so many people do have various lawn care companies that come into the neighborhood, and some days it's hard to even drive through because there are so many various companies in there. So I'm like, just mow the lawn so that we don't have to do that, because that's always a big debate in our household every single summer.
Yeah, that's a large HOA fee for seemingly not too much being done. So that's kind of questionable. Questionable.
Yeah, I should probably get on the board again, but I don't have patience. I'm not a very PC person. I don't like to play the game. I'm like, let's get to the bottom of this.
Yeah,
come on.
You're a very straight to the point person.
They want to sit around and talk about this, that, and the other. Just get it done.
Exactly.
Anyway, but I guess that's one of the good things, though, that comes with summer is, you have to mow the lawn, but that means that you have grass to actually mow, which means the weather is nice.
Yeah, it's all about perspective, Ronnie. Looking at it that way, that's a good way to look at it. Hey, if I'm seeing the grass and it's time to mow it again, it means it's nice outside. I'm not dealing with the snow. I'm not freezing cold when I walk outside. And you know what? Maybe I bring a little glass of water with me, or something to fan myself with when I'm outside and it's hotter. But the sun's shining. We have nice days. It's not cloudy and gray and gloomy every single day. The sun's not setting at 4 o'clock. Well, I think that's a win.
Exactly. We'll take it, I guess. It's better than shoveling snow.
Exactly.
So, with that, though, hey, the big Ford Field vaccination clinic. The first big day starts today. They, of course, did a soft launch yesterday, and so a lot of the media crews were there doing a run-through to see how things went. It seems like it was pretty good, but today really is going to start the big vaccination effort. But we're hearing here in Oakland County as well. Oakland County is going to be holding 16 different vaccination clinics. Keep in mind, though, these are going to be by appointment only. They're going to be conducted by the Health Division. They started yesterday. They're going to run through March 29th. Clinics are going to be held in Howley, Madison Heights, Novi, Pontiac, Rochester, Southfield, Waterford, and West Bloomfield. County received 26,400 doses of the COVID vaccine from the state this week, which includes 2,300 Pfizer doses from FEMA. So that allotment is up from last week. Now, the Health Division is going to administer the FEMA doses provided as part of the established Ford Field regional vaccination sites. So they are going to take them. We've been telling you about how at Ford Field, they're going to give 5,000 doses at Ford Field, but 1,000 is going to be out in the community as part of what they're calling, mobile clinics. So some of those are going to be here in Oakland County. That will be Waterford as well as Pontiac. So more and more people are starting to get the vaccine here. Now, keep in mind, if you want to register with the county, go to oaklandcountyvaccine.com.
Yes, and that link is on the article on our website, civiccentertv.com/coronavirus. You'll click on that. You can save your spot. You can also find more information on Oakland County's vaccine process and see some of the numbers as well. And if you've received your vaccine, there's the Remove Your Spot tool as well. That's very helpful. If you've received your vaccine in another location other than through Oakland County itself, remove yourself from the list so that other people can advance forward and get their vaccine.
And so also on this website, just so people know if you're watching, if not, go to oaklandcountyvaccine.com. They post what they're calling is like a dashboard. Mm-hmm. And so you can also find some of that information there as well. So if you want to keep track of how many people are actually getting the vaccine. So it's how many doses they received versus how many were actually administered. So that's a good way to keep track here in our own neighborhood.
Yeah, a good way to keep track and see for yourself how things are going with Oakland County's vaccination efforts in the local area as the pandemic continues on.
Well, that's good to know that we are getting more and more doses because we are seeing another surge here in the state of Michigan. 12% of Michigan's 20,787 COVID-19 tests came back positive Monday, marking the highest single day of positivity rate since so far this year in 2021, and the highest rate since December the 8th. State's latest surge in cases combined with a reduction in test process per day have resulted in a positive test rate higher than 5% for 11 consecutive days. So the 7-day average is up to about 8.1%. Additionally, the state health department reported 3,579 new coronavirus cases and 16 new deaths on Tuesday. Of the new deaths, 8 occurred outside of the last 24 hours. Remember, 3 times a week, the state health department does a vital records review. And so they'll add those deaths in to that. So far we're averaging about 2,938 new COVID-19 cases per day, 16 new deaths per day over the last week. And I anticipate some of those numbers are even going to be higher because we had St. Patrick's Day last week, and the weather was beautiful that day.
Yeah, it was a really nice day. The restaurants had just had their capacity increase. More people were going out and celebrating. The vaccine process was underway. So there's all that excitement and hoopla going on. And then on top of that, increased gatherings as we're a year into the pandemic and people wanted to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. So this increase in the number of cases may still continue to be on the rise, this little uptick we're going through. As it says in the article, it's the largest surge in cases, but it's also with a reduction in tests processed per day. So some of this may be that they're not processing as many tests per day, and they are able to process some more on other days and get more positive tests. That being said, the positivity rate being higher than 5% for 11 consecutive days is definitely going to be a concern for the state of Michigan as that continues to rise upward. And the average over the last 7 days has been around 8%, which is much higher than that low chance of community spread that leads to a higher likelihood for some of these regulations that are in place to be lifted or other ones to be put in place.
I know that Sunday, I don't know if you watched the Sunday morning news programming, Dr. Fauci was urging the governor to ease back on some of the reopening, saying because the state of Michigan here, we're one of a handful of states across the country seeing a surge in cases. And I would think along with that, we had St. Patrick's Day, but we have so many people going to Florida right now. My Facebook feed is filled with people who have taken off, gone to Florida to vacation, which people normally do this time of year anyway, with the state of Michigan. But of course, we've seen the images and the pictures out of Florida right now. It's crazy, but you have to remember all those people are then leaving and coming back to their home states.
Yeah, and we've heard stories of great concerns from local law enforcement in Florida, particularly in areas like Miami Beach, where they're having trouble controlling the crowds that are there coming in from out of state. They don't really have much of a care for the local rules, knowing that the state's rules are much more relaxed down in Florida. And much like last year in the beginning of this pandemic, as people returned from spring break, having been fairly carefree regarding coronavirus safety protocols, you saw an even greater uptick. So combined with the St. Patrick's Day factor that could factor in to a further increase in Michigan's positive case rate, those spring breakers coming back too from Florida in areas where people have definitely not been very careful, if careful at all, could also be a cause for concern.
Well, and normally this time of year, too, we have so many people that are going to restaurants and bars to be able to watch some of the March Madness sporting events, because a lot of people don't have cable now. So they don't get it at home. So they'll go to the bars and the restaurants to be able to watch some of these games. So that could have a factor in these numbers. Although, of course, they're not watching the Spartans.
Yeah, they're not.
I had to get that in there.
It's fine. It's fine. It's not too soon. We were terrible this year, and it's no one's surprise. So, yeah, they're not watching the Spartans. They're still watching the Wolverines. It's about the only team they can still watch in the Big Ten and not be completely disgusted with what they see out on the floor. So that's also a factor. People going back to bars, people watching these games. And these bars and restaurants, as much as they are taking their safety protocols seriously, a lot of them who have just reopened are doing their best to try to keep their business alive and provide a little bit of a spark so that post-pandemic, they're not continuing to struggle to just simply stay open. And so maybe they're not following in every situation these protocols to a T. So
I found it odd, too. I think some of the games is it like TBS or True TV? Those are the channels that you have to have in order to be able to watch some of these games. So it's not, on regular TV like ABC, NBC. True TV, who would have thought that they would be the ones to have some of these games?
Yeah, it's all a partnership through CBS and Viacom. They've been doing that for years, expanding it out. I mean, it used to be some of these games would either be tape delayed or would only be on really TNT and CBS, but they've expanded out to all their other networks as well going forward so that they can have several games on simultaneously and move through the tournament a little bit faster. So it's also good for these other networks too, the smaller networks, particularly on the cable side. And it's good for people like us in the cable TV business because people are still subscribing to cable just to get these games.
Yeah. Do you still have cable?
I don't. I have streaming. I'm a horrible person.
You work, but that's okay. But your generation,
right?
most people that I know of like younger generation, they don't have cable, but our cable bill is crazy every month. It's like almost $200 a month. And one of the reasons, of course, that we have it is so my husband can watch all of these games because he needs to be able to do so for work.
Right. And that's a lot. I think that's one of those factors, like we talked about yesterday with Nate Adams from theonlycritic.com. He said that's one of those reasons why he believes that cable's not going to go away as quickly as maybe we think it is with the momentum in streaming, is because of those sports packages, because different streaming packages like ESPN Plus don't have live sports, at least not yet. And there isn't one specific service other than these general cable-like services and streaming that have all of those channels. So it's a little less momentum.
So speaking of Nate, we were talking about the movies and so many of the theaters starting to reopen. Regal Cinemas, the second largest movie theater chain in the U.S., announced it will be reopening starting April the 2nd. Regal had been one of the most notable holdouts in the gradual reopening of cinemas nationwide for nearly half a year. Its 7,211 screens in 549 theaters in the U.S. have been dark, including the theaters here locally in Walled Lake and Lansing. Doors are going to open, though, early next month, with attendance limited, of course, to 25 to 50% capacity, depending on the state's rules and regulations. And, of course, it is going to be timed with the release of the big movie Godzilla versus Kong. So a lot of people anticipating that movie could be a big blockbuster, and some of these movie theaters really need that boost.
Yeah, again, much like we talked about yesterday, and Nate Adams even predicted that this film and others that are expecting to have some big expectations, or at least are garnering some excitement from the general public, like Bob Odenkirk's Nobody, are expected to be those kinds of pictures, at least coming up, that are going to attract people back to the theater because they're not going to be released immediately on streaming. They may, a few weeks later be released on streaming platforms, but it's not like Warner Brothers, who's releasing all their films simultaneously in theaters and on streaming. And then on top of that, a film like Godzilla versus Kong is something that a lot of people want the full movie theater experience for, and I think that's another thing that's making cinema companies like Regal consider reopening for that movie specifically, get that boom back into their business, and hopefully have enough momentum from there to remain open with safety protocols, of course, in place.
So I binge watched Zack Snyder's new Justice League the other night. It's 4 hours long, and that would be another good movie to see in the movie theater. Plus, I watched it on my computer. And so you've already seen it. If you saw the 2017, was it 17 or 19 version?
I believe so.
You've seen basically the movie, but it's all the additional parts that were added back into it. So that there are some movies, Tyler, that you really need that movie theater experience.
Yeah, there are a lot of those, and part of the reason why these movie theaters have shut down over the pandemic, other than, of course, the safety protocols being in place and them needing some time to adjust to that, or them being so severe that it wasn't even worth staying open. Another factor has been a lot of these blockbuster movies have not been released, or have had delayed release, so that they could get people out to the movie theaters, because they didn't want to have reduced number of people viewing them on their premieres and having a very low budget return instead of the best bang for their buck. So waiting out this pandemic, now as we're starting to come out of this, a lot of these films that have been delayed may end up moving up their dates a little bit earlier on in 2021 as we get into the summer, as we come out of the pandemic and theaters begin to reopen.
So, of course, you can find all the latest headlines. Just go to civiccentertv.com, click on coronavirus, and that's where you'll see the latest headlines. We post them each and every morning. We have a great lineup ahead on today's show, Tyler.
Yes, we do. Yeah, really good lineup today.
We'll be speaking with the Birmingham Museum just after the break, and then, of course, our good friend Kenneth Gutman with Walled Lake's Consolidated Schools will be joining us at 10:40, and then in the 11 o'clock hour, we'll be speaking with Curt Lawson from the West Bloomfield Police Department, along with Pamela Good. She is the president Beyond Basics. I don't know if people had the opportunity to read her op-ed that was in the Detroit News. So we'll be talking to her, a very important topic as well. And then, of course, we will be rounding out today's show, speaking with the executive director for Rising Voices of Asian American Families, because so many hate crimes are up and geared towards Asian Americans right now. So we'll be speaking to her in the 11 o'clock hour.
Michigan, the coronavirus pandemic has put us all to the test. And now it's time to put COVID-19 to the test. As we move forward, testing will be critical. We encourage anyone who has reason to get tested to do so, those with symptoms and those without. If you are leaving home and going back to work, get tested. If you think you may have COVID-19 or you've been exposed recently through family, friends, or coworkers, get tested. Our test locator tool can help you find the right testing site that fits your needs. Even if you're looking for easy access with no cost, no prescription, and no appointment necessary, we've got you covered. Help Michigan move forward, not backward. To find a testing site or learn more, visit michigan.gov/coronavirus test. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
The only way to beat COVID-19 is to face it.
You can't get too comfortable.
You can't forget the danger.
Wear the mask.
Wear the mask.
Wear the mask. Wash your hands.
Keep a safe distance.
Especially in the next few months.
You know we'll get back to normal.
We'll get back to normal.
We'll get back to normal.
Someday.
But not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
But not yet.
But not yet.
Consider virtual gatherings for the holidays.
Curbside food orders.
Grocery delivery.
And shopping local.
Shop local.
And especially shopping local.
Let's beat this virus. We can if we face it together.
Together.
Together. Together.
Together.
Together.
Together.
Together. Together.
Together.
Together.
For the latest information, visit oakgov.com/COVID.
Welcome back here to the Megacast. I was telling Tyler in the break, I haven't had caffeine. I am just not awake this morning, so I'm going to try to stand up, see if it energizes me. But I'm still nursing this sprained ankle. I tripped over the dog.
Right.
It's been over a week now. I've never sprained my ankle before.
Yeah, it's not fun. I've done it plenty of times, sometimes consecutively over the course of weeks, and it's no fun. It's definitely no fun.
I thought it would be healed by now.
No, it takes its sweet time.
And of course, I signed up for the half marathon. The Detroit Free Press Half Marathon was going to start training this week because we're 6 months out.
Yeah.
I have a friend that we're doing it, and then I'm like, I'm still hobbling. I think I need to wait a little bit.
Yeah, you're definitely going to want to wait, do some ankle exercises instead, some stability stuff, and stay away maybe from the running for just a little bit longer while you nurse the sprained ankle away so you don't re-injure it. Just saying from experience, only because I didn't entirely follow that advice and consistently re-injured sprained ankles in the past. It's great.
I'll learn from you, Tyler.
Yeah.
Hey, with us now, one thing that I can do is sit around and watch videos online and get online because Caitlyn Donnelly joins us now. She is a museum specialist over at the Birmingham Museum. And Caitlyn, you guys are pretty much still virtual, right?
We are still currently closed to the public, and just like last year, we're looking at not being able to have in-person school tours this spring. So we had to get a little creative and figure out ways to bring the museum to the students instead of the students coming to us.
And how's that going?
It's going great. We just this morning launched 6 new videos in our virtual school tour program, which you can find on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. So we had 6 videos there before, just going through the various rooms of the John West Hunter House, which was built in 1822. It's the oldest house in Birmingham and one of the oldest in Oakland County, and kind of tells the story of, how someone like John West Hunter's family might have lived in Birmingham in the very early days of that community.
Wow. So how long have you been with the museum?
I just passed my 5-year anniversary here at the museum, so it's really wonderful to be able to, be involved in so many projects here, even in some pretty challenging times.
What's been one of the biggest things that you learned since joining the team there that you didn't know about Birmingham?
Well, I'm an East Side girl. I grew up in St. Clair Shores, so I had a lot to learn about Birmingham. And I think one of the facts that just continually kind of blows my mind is just how old Woodward Avenue is. So a lot of people, you associate Woodward Avenue with the Woodward Dream Cruise that happens every summer. You think classic cars, but Woodward Avenue, when, some of the first settlers came into Oakland County, they encountered it as the Saginaw Trail, which was a Native American trail. And we have evidence of the Saginaw Trail being in use 10,000 years ago. So originally it was a game trail, and mastodons were using this game trail. And then when the Native Americans came into this area, they used it as well. And then when you had people like the Hunters and the Willets come through Oakland County, they used that too, because why reinvent the wheel when you have a perfectly good trail there?
Wow, that is amazing.
Yeah, so I tell people, I'm like, 10,000 years ago, there were still traffic jams on Woodward Avenue. Instead of an overturned tractor trailer, it was, maybe a mastodon that, was just chilling in the middle of the trail and preventing all other traffic from going through.
Caitlyn Donnelly with us here on the Megacast. She's a museum specialist with the Birmingham Museum. When do you anticipate that you'll reopen the doors to the public?
Right. So right now, the city is working on their plan. We're trying to get employees vaccinated. So hopefully, I have hope for this summer. That would be really amazing. I am kind of one of our outreach people here at the museum. So I love meeting with guests and talking with people. So when we did close to the public last March, I had a little bit of an identity crisis. It was hard not having new people to talk to every day. So I'm looking forward to that myself, as I'm sure everyone is.
So I know you said that you typically are posting videos. How is that going? What are some of the videos that are up right now that people can watch?
Sure. Well, aside from our school tour videos, we do have some of our older videos. So we do have our series called What Were They Thinking? And it's where one of my colleagues here at the museum, she is a fantastic chef. She makes recipes from the past, and we would all taste test them. So if you've ever wondered what an 1820s recipe for jugged hare would be like, you can check that out. We also
and what is that recipe? I'm curious.
Yeah.
What?
So hair, like a rabbit hair,
right?
not
Right.
Like head hair. You would cook that in a earthenware jug. So it's kind of like an 1800s crock pot that you put in with herbs and spices, and you put it at the back of your fire. You'd cook that for 6 hours. You could forget about it, go do, feed the chickens, whatever else you had to do. And then come back and, kind of have this nice little meal. And it was pretty good. I've never had a hare before, so it was a really fun experience for me. And then from there, we tried 1940s jellied beet and cheese salad, which was interesting.
Yeah, I think I'll pass on that one.
Yeah. That was one of the grosser ones. I think we did have our community online vote on various recipes for us to try. And I think everyone voted for that one just because it sounded the grossest. And I mean, it wasn't as gross as I thought it was going to be, but not something I'd have every day.
Caitlyn Donnelly with us here on the Megacast. She's a museum specialist over at the Birmingham Museum. How is funding going right now?
We're actually in a fairly good spot. We are a department of the city. So we have had that coming in. We've also had several fundraising projects going on while we're closed. One of the last ones, the most successful, was to get a gravestone erected in Greenwood Cemetery for several formerly enslaved members of our community. That last year we kind of discovered that these individuals lived in the community. They were pretty prominent individuals, and they didn't have markers in the cemetery. So we thought, oh, wouldn't this be a great opportunity to reach out to our community, do some fundraising? So we exceeded our fundraising goal for that. And in the process of doing that research, we discovered all these other communities or families of African Americans that lived in Birmingham in the mid-1800s. Some were formerly enslaved, some were always free. And so it's giving us some more insight into that period of Birmingham history that we hadn't had before. So, you know, when you work at a museum, I think like when you work everywhere, you start one project and it leads to 13 others. So that was one of those.
Caitlyn Donnelly with us here on the Megacast. And with that, when you do reopen, when it comes to the museum, its history, are you concerned about reopening to the public and having to increase your cleaning around the museum?
That has definitely been something that we have discussed, because we only have 3 staff members here at the museum. And so way back last year, we were actually already in conversation with the fire chief of the city in Birmingham. He is the one coordinating our COVID response as a city, about, you know, how are we going to have people in the building? How are they going to interact with the objects? Because we do have several exhibits where people can actually touch the objects and handle them. Can we still do that? How are we going to clean? And so one of the ideas that we'll probably go forward with is having timed tickets to the museum. So, you know, parties up to maybe 6, you have a set time you can come into the museum, you can see both houses, have a tour, and then that will also give us time to clean after each guest or guest group has gone through. So it'll look a little bit different. We might not be able to have drop-in visitors like we always had before, but we're going to do our best to make sure that everyone who wants to come to the museum can come.
I will say, Caitlyn, I think all the school-age kids, they need to learn cursive writing, because now they've been taking it out of schools. But when you go to museums, so many times they have, you know, letters on display, and they always had such beautiful writing back in the day, but it's always in cursive. And that's one of the big things I always wonder about. If the kids don't have to learn cursive, when they go to the museum, can they read these letters?
Right. Well, I mean, to that, I would say I learned cursive when I was in elementary school, and I abandoned it pretty quickly because cursive is supposed to be a system of writing where you can write really fast, and I could never get the hang of that. So I always printed. As soon as I was able to, I was like, forget this. I'm going to go back to printing. So it's something I've had to relearn when I've worked here, is to be able to go into and look at the old letters. And you'll find, too, it's really interesting. I've been working with a collection from a woman who was traveling around in the 1930s. So she was going to Europe, she was going to Mexico. She was a single woman, you know, just kind of enjoying her life. And she was a school teacher, so she wrote very beautiful cursive, but it's slightly different cursive than the cursive you're going to learn today. So you had to kind of get used to that and get in the mode of, okay, this is how cursive was written and taught in the 1930s. It's a little bit different from how I learned it. So, you know, I have to adjust to that. And it's been a fun challenge. There's been some times where I've had to go to my boss or my colleagues and be like, what is this? I have no idea what they're trying to say. And they're like, they're writing the name of Birmingham. Like, wow. So, yeah, sometimes the people who work in the museum we're about the same level of being able to read cursive as the guests who come in. And a lot of times I'm sure guests who come in can read it a little bit better than even I can. So my mom is always after me.
Caitlyn Donnelly with us here on the Megacast. She's with Birmingham Museum. We are living in historic times right now. We're hoping we don't have another pandemic for another 100 years. As someone who enjoys history and you've made it your career, how are you looking at this period right now? And is the museum doing anything to document this time in our history?
Right, that's a great question. We have been kind of discussing how do we go about documenting this? Because for us, one of the things that we were a little frustrated about in 2018 was we didn't really have any firsthand accounts of people living in Birmingham during the influenza epidemic of 1918, and we were even trying to find newspaper accounts, and they were pretty spotty. So we started going into the city, and so there's a lot of museums in the area, and they are asking for oral histories and masks and things like that from the community. And we decided, let's approach this a little bit differently. Let's approach it from, what did the city do? What did we do? What did, say, the police department do? So we have been looking at that and collecting objects and written records from the actual community itself. And so I think, we always are thinking about, we're always living in historic times, whether or not there is a pandemic, and how are we best able to use the resources that we have to make sure that the people who come after us know what was going on. Sometimes people think, oh, well, history is something that happened only 100 years ago or 500 years ago, but history is yesterday. And that's something that we are trying to more and more bring to light through our exhibits, because we do have the Cream exhibit, and a lot of people think, oh, Cream magazine, that was the 1970s, 1980s, that's not history. It's like, well, even if it's not history to you today, one day it will be. And we need to make sure that we have that story, that history preserved.
And to document the times, and how has technology played into how you're documenting things today?
Technology plays a really great role. So we are able to reach out via email and just ask, say, different departments in the community, like, how are you doing X, Y, and Z? How are you doing this? And also to be able to communicate with our community online. We did a lot on social media throughout this past year, being able to keep in contact with our community and let them know we're still here, we're still preserving things, we're still working. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions, or you just want to see something cool in our collection that you can't come in and physically see, but we can take some really nice pictures or shoot a really nice little video about it for you.
Caitlyn, just another minute or two here with you on the Megacast. This is Women's History Month. Any story that you want to share with us about any of the women there in Birmingham?
Well, Martha Baldwin is my favorite woman in Birmingham history, and she is kind of responsible for so much of community and social life in the city of Birmingham. She was born in 1840 and she died in 1906, I believe. So huge swath of the late 1800s, which was a time when a lot of things in Birmingham are happening. And she was a woman who knew the value of a well-placed threat because she had some money. And she had a lot of influence, and she had time. She didn't have a family, so she had a lot of time to mold Birmingham into the image of the city that she wanted. And that included, taking care of the cemetery, a village improvement society, the library. Baldwin Public Library is named after her. She started a library society, and, they started with 40 books. And it was a small lending library, and eventually it became a public library in Birmingham. And then after her death, she left money for a new school in Birmingham. She was an educator, and she also realized that women didn't have as many opportunities as men did, and same with girls and boys in school. So in her will, she's like, all right, you're going to build this new school. It's going to be named after me. And also what you're going to do is you're going to have equal facilities for men and women, because, you know, a lot of schools at that time didn't have women's sports because they're like, oh, we don't have the facilities for it. And we're going to have to raise taxes if we want to do that. No one wants that. She's like, nah, okay, we're going to have equal washrooms. We're going to have equal shower facilities. Everyone's going to have equal gym time. And she's like, oh, and also if you don't break ground on this project in 3 years, all this money is going to go to a park named after me instead. So chop, chop.
Wow. She was a person who got things done, huh?
A very strong personality. So, and a lot of times you need that, you know, to get the ball rolling on things.
Well, it'd be great when the doors actually reopen to the museum and people can go in and explore the history of Birmingham as well. Caitlyn Donnelly with us. She's a museum specialist for the Birmingham Museum. It's been great having you with us on the show today.
Oh, thank you so much. It was a real pleasure.
So quickly, if people want to find out more, how can they do so?
Right. So you can go on bham.gov /museum, and that is our webpage. You can find us on Facebook, we're Birmingham Museum. Twitter, we're at bham_museum, and we're on Instagram as well, the Birmingham Museum MI.
Well, that is so great to know that you guys are out there. You do have some very interesting posts on Facebook as well. So thank you for sharing the history of Birmingham with us.
Oh, you're very welcome. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Have a wonderful rest of the day.
You as well. We're going to take a quick break here on the Megacast, and when we come back, we'll be speaking with the superintendent for the Walled Lake School District. This is the Oakland County Megacast.
COVID-19 has caused many families to fall behind on finances and on groceries. But you're not alone. You shouldn't have to worry about putting food on the table. My Bridges offers access to quality food and income assistance to help families across the state get the food support they need. It's easy to apply and easy to start shopping. Apply for services at michigan.gov/MIBridges. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. Michigan, we're calling on you to save lives. Don't ignore it. Don't let it go to voicemail. It's urgent. In fact, it's critical. Because if you've been in close contact with someone who tests positive for COVID-19, you may have been exposed to the virus. And you could get a call from My COVID Help or your local health department. So please answer the call to learn how to protect yourself, your family, and friends. We're calling on you to stop the spread of COVID-19, to make it safe to reopen businesses and help Michigan move forward. So if you get a call from My COVID Help or your local health department, you may have been exposed to someone with COVID-19. To protect us all, answer the call. Learn more at michigan.gov/containcovid. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Welcome back to the Megacast. How many hundreds of times do you think you've heard that PSA over the past year?
Plenty of time. Enough. I've heard it enough times.
You know what? It will be great when we don't have to play it any longer.
Yes, it will be. I'll very much enjoy not hearing answer the call. I'm tired of answering the call. I'm done.
And I would imagine that our next guest is just as eager as the rest of us to have the pandemic behind us and have the doors back open and normal again. With us, the superintendent for the Walled Lake Consolidated School District, Kenneth Gutman. Always great having you with us.
Always great to be here. Thank you, Ronnie. Good to see you, Tyler, as well. And yes, I would very much like to return to somewhat of some normalcy at some point. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a few years before we get back to where we were last year. However, the school doors are starting to reopen. How are things looking in your school district right now?
They've been really good. We've been open. Our elementaries have been open since November, and our secondary schools reopened not too long ago. We're going to allow for more students to return in the near future as well. So everyone will at least have the opportunity to return if they would like to, while still offering virtual options. It looks different. We have some barriers in place. People, of course, are wearing masks. We observe social distancing where we can. And it's not the same kind of school year, but it feels really good to be in schools and have students and staff there. And ideally, it's a lot better next year.
So with that, we know that the CDC did recently change some of the guidelines for schools. They are allowing for 3 feet of social distancing rather than 6 feet. But even that still has to be a challenge because the buildings weren't built to be socially distant.
No, most buildings in this country over the years have been built for assembly line education with students in rows. And of course, we've adapted over the years with better seating arrangements and that sort of thing. But no, we were already doing 3 feet or under. And so the CDC caught up to what we've been doing. They did some studies in, I think, 4 different areas in different states and found that 3 feet would be acceptable, which is really good because that's all we could accommodate. And that's all most people can accommodate in most schools across the country that, as you said, weren't built for this.
So with that, though, we do know that, was it Keith Elementary that had to close down and go back remote? Does that still keep you awake at night, worrying about these outbreaks?
Yeah, Ronnie, it's one of the things that keeps me awake at night. We watch the numbers like we would watch the stock market. Every day I get a list of students and staff quarantined or positive, and we make the determination as to whether or not we'll be able to keep buildings open. And in Keith's case, we went from a very low percentage to 23% overnight. And it wasn't positive cases as much as it was quarantines. And so people who were exposed to people. And so it was unfortunate we had to close Keith for a short period of time until after spring break. But I always will err on the side of caution. We've set a district limit of 10% staff or students quarantine. And it's a very conservative estimate, a very conservative number. But again, we want to protect everyone. And we immediately switched to virtual learning. So learning continues to happen.
Well, and by now, a year into this, people are used to it. So, that adaptation isn't taking as long as it once did. I would imagine it's pretty much take your computer home with you every single day.
Right. Well, exactly. A year ago, when we pivoted over the course of a weekend, I think it was March 13th, the 16th, or just after the 16th, somewhere in there, we pivoted to online learning. We've come a long way since then. And so now it's more, I wouldn't say seamless, but the transition is much easier.
Ken Gutman with us here on the Megacast. He's the superintendent for the Walled Lake Consolidated School District. The good news, more and more people are becoming vaccinated. How is that going within your school district right now?
It's going really well. We believe we have over 50% vaccinated. We polled our staff and got a pretty decent response rate. We've held 4 vaccination clinics ourselves, or that have been held for our staff. We had some events with Huron Valley Sinai, and then we also had a 150-person clinic here at our administrative building. And so we think we're well on the way to having more and more of our staff vaccinated each and every day. I know in Oakland County, they've been able to get a lot of people through, and that everyone who's been on the list has been able to, everyone who wants to be on the list, who's eligible, has been able to get on the list from an educational standpoint.
Yeah, that is the good thing. It seems like the supply is starting to catch up with the demand. But until the students are able to get vaccinated, it's still going to be tricky.
It is, although we are finding that most of the transmission isn't happening in schools. And so that's the good news, that if our staff are vaccinated, it's a start. And yeah, certainly the more people who get vaccinated, who want to be vaccinated, who are able to be vaccinated, the better. I'm not an epidemiologist, but it seems to me that the more people who are vaccinated, the better off we'll be.
Right. And with that, how does that work and how's that conversation going? Because students 16 or under 16, so 15 and under, cannot be vaccinated as of yet until more studies are done. So if teachers have been vaccinated, but a student tests positive, does the teacher still have to go out and quarantine? How does that conversation work?
So it really depends. We follow CDC guidance, which means that the teacher would have had to have been within 6 feet or whatever proximity it would be, 6 feet for more than 15 minutes over the course of a 24-hour period. That doesn't always happen. And so it wouldn't necessarily be the case.
It is so confusing, even still. I mean, and as we're a year into it and you're getting more used to it and you're able to adapt easier, there are still these curveballs that keep coming our way.
Yeah, every time we learn the rules, they change. It's been that way for about a year now.
Right. With that, though, the teachers have to feel good about getting back into the classrooms.
I would say the majority do. I think that there's still people who are frightened, as with a lot of people in society. They have concern. They may be caring for aging parents. They may have their own health issues. And so, but by and large, the teachers I've spoken to in schools have been really happy to be there. It feels right. It feels normal to be there with students. And we're going to open in the fall. We're going to open in person, but we're still going to offer a virtual option. So we may have some teachers who want to teach virtually in the fall. And we may have some parents who say, you know what, we're not over this, and we want to keep our kids home. And so we're working on a virtual option as well. But I think when we return the majority of our students in the fall, when we don't have to continually do teacher and staff changes over the course of a year, as we've done, I think 5 times this year, life will get much better for everyone.
So how does that work when the teachers are teaching in classroom and virtual as well? Are the students pretty much attending that class virtually, and then they're zooming in on a computer screen or a monitor for the teacher to be able to see them, but they're also teaching to the classroom?
They are, and I think it's complicated, and I commend our staff for undertaking this. It's not easy, but they are essentially teaching 2 groups of students at the same time at the secondary level. So they're teaching students who are on their monitor at the same time as they're teaching students who are in front of them. And the challenge intensifies when you have more students in person than you have online, because you don't have classroom management issues to the same extent with everyone online or with more people online. But as you have more people in person, you have to pay special attention to those online so they don't get lost. And it's tricky, it's challenging, and it's not a model we'd like to advocate, or for which we'd like to advocate in the future.
Right. I'm sitting here trying to think of, if I'm a teacher, how is this working? Like, oh wait, I haven't paid attention to them for a while. Let me zoom back, turn around and address the Zoom class.
Yeah, it's really hard. It's challenging. And again, my hat's off to our teachers who are just doing an incredible job making that work.
So with that, I know some schools have put basically little plastic barriers around each student. Is that how it's working and looking in your school district right now?
Well, it depends which classroom. We're not micromanaging that. It depends on the comfort zone within each classroom, and it depends on the circumstance and what the activity is. But it certainly does exist in cases where students are eating without masks, and it does exist in cases where the teacher is more comfortable having that kind of setup.
So right now, high school sports, are you guys playing sports?
We are. Sports are going on, and we're trying to interpret the latest order from MDHHS regarding testing of athletes. I spoke to our athletic director this morning, and it's complicated, but we do have athletics happening right now.
Because with that, what is the test? And I couldn't imagine, is it every day? Because if it's the nasal swab test that these poor kids have to do every day, ouch.
Yeah, ouch is right. I've done one of those. I don't know if you've had that experience, but certainly I wouldn't want that daily. I don't have all of the details on that. I know our athletic director's on top of it.
Yeah, I was talking to someone, and they travel a lot for work. So every time before they get on the plane, they have to do the test. And when you're traveling as much as they're traveling and doing international, he's like, my nose just can't take it anymore.
Yeah, it's slightly uncomfortable, to say the least.
Right? Going through it once was enough. I don't want to do it every day and every other day. We're talking with Kenneth Gutman. He's the superintendent for the Walled Lake Consolidated School District. Can we dip into the world of finance for just a second?
Let's go there.
How's the budget going?
We're actually at a point where we're feeling okay about it. We'll never feel good about it in public schools until we can have a weighted funding formula. And we're a long way from getting there. We can go all the way back to the early 90s when we changed our state funding formula to one that was predicated on property values increasing. And so I won't go all the way back there and bring us forward, except to say that our state budget will never be what schools need under the current formula. But I will say we're in a better place right now, that some of the stimulus money is helping. And then Senate Bill, actually PA3 now just recently passed, which does provide money for school districts who offer the opportunity for all students to return to 5-day-a-week instruction in person for at least 20 hours. We will qualify for that, we believe. As we've offered it to our parents, we'll get the majority of our students back who want to be back over the next short period of time. And that, for our district, is a $1.8 million swing. So there are some opportunities with some federal relief money and some state money. It's not where we'd like it to be, but it's a lot better than it's been.
Well, and with that, Superintendent, what are your thoughts about having some of this money connected to these rules and regulations about getting kids back into the classrooms? Because, some school districts maybe aren't set up the same way.
Yeah, if we didn't feel we could do it safely, we wouldn't comply with that and we'd lose out on the money. And I think it's an individual district decision. I respect the work that school boards have had to undertake this year as well, because they've been placed in a place that's unheard of for school boards. They've been placed in a quasi-administrative role at times. They've had to continue to interpret these types of things and make decisions based on, ideally, what's best for children. And so if you feel like you can't follow that safely, you don't have to bring everyone back, but you will forego some funding. Do I think it should be tied to that? I do not. But we're going to do it safely and not forego the funding. And it's a difficult place to be.
Yeah, I'm sure some of these school board members are like, "What did I sign up for?" When they were, it's an elected position, and
it's an elected volunteer position, Ronnie. They don't get paid for this. They're making decisions on behalf of everyone's child, and they do it out of the goodness of their heart, not for some great political gain. So they run for office to be a volunteer.
Yeah.
And this year's been exceedingly difficult for all board members.
Well, I hope one thing that comes out of this, people really start to pay attention when they go to the polls and they see these positions on that ballot, because so many people just mark and they don't do the homework. And so it is really important to start paying attention to these very, very local level positions. And with that, one thing I saw on the list that I absolutely love what you guys are doing there at your school district is you're bringing in therapy dogs. Why is that needed? But I love it.
Well, I could tell you personally why it's needed. I had a visit from Champ, who's our therapy dog at Mary Helen Guest Elementary this morning, and I was in a meeting with Champ for about a half an hour, and I will tell you, I felt better all day. So firsthand testimony, I got my therapy from one of our therapy dogs this morning. We currently have one at Western Dakota. Western High School. Dakota is our therapy dog there, and Champ is at Mary Helen Guest. We're going to bring 3 on in the next year or so, and we're looking to bring 3 more on following that. There's research behind it, but I can tell you anecdotally that seeing those dogs in the building is just it changes the demeanor, it changes the mood of staff and students. I can think back to when we first brought Champ to Mary Helen Guest. And the principal sent me a picture of a student who was smiling and said, "This is the first time in the last several years this student has ever smiled." Wow. And it was just a few minutes just hanging out with Champ. Students read to Champ. Students spend time with Champ. It makes a huge difference, and it makes a big difference at Western with Dakota. And I look forward to that with our other therapy dogs. Eventually, we'd love to have one in every school, but we'll only do it in a way that's safe, in a way that people are comfortable. We were working on our handbook, our therapy dog handbook this morning, and Champ provided great input.
But, what about kids that are maybe allergic to pets?
Yeah, we're going to be sensitive to that. If we have students who are allergic to pets, we'll either have a plan to accommodate that or we won't bring a pet into a building.
So, and we know more and more entities are starting to use therapy dogs, not just at the hospitals. We're seeing it at the courtrooms as well. They're starting to bring in the dogs. And like you said, so many libraries have had some of these dogs come in because kids are more comfortable reading and petting a dog at the same time. Who owns these dogs? Is it a staff member?
So the district actually owns each of the dogs. They are our dogs. At the end of 10 years of service, we do allow that staff member to purchase the dog for $1. We're only a couple of years into the program, so we have a ways to go. But the dogs are actually district owned. They do stay at the home of a staff member who's in the building, in the particular school. And we do have some people who oversee the program as well.
It is really a great program. I love that you guys are doing it and you're expanding it as well. And I would anticipate you're going to start seeing more and more school districts do this, especially coming out of COVID, because there are so many emotional issues that are going to need to be addressed over the next coming years.
I would agree. I think the biggest difficulty we've experienced, other than people who've become ill, is the social emotional aspect, both for staff and students of the past year. And I would agree the degree to which therapy dogs can help heal some of that, is the degree to which we'll be better as a school district.
With us right now on the show is Ken Gutman. He is the superintendent for Walled Lake Consolidated School District. And with that, Superintendent, anything maybe I didn't ask that you want to touch on today?
Yeah, let me touch on, thank you, Roddy, for that opportunity. I really want to touch on really quickly some great bond projects we have. As you know, a couple of years ago, our community passed a $316 million bond issue, one of the largest in the state, and we are well underway with construction. Our early childhood center is coming up in the area of 13 Mile Road, just off of Meadowbrook, and it is going to be a beautiful facility for our youngest learners. Dublin Elementary groundbreaking is coming up. We're going to rebuild Dublin Elementary in White Lake. It's going to come down on the same site. We're going to build it on the same site as the building that will come down. Walled Lake Western High School is getting a $90 million rebuild. It'll be equitable with Central and Northern. And then we're also this summer working on Guest Elementary, Smart Middle School, Sarah Banks Middle School, Walnut Creek Middle School. And we'll be meeting with our staff soon to have some of the discussions about what will happen this summer for construction work. So construction's well underway and we're building the future.
That's great. That's, bond money at work right there. You're listening to 89.3 WBLD Orchard Lake, 88.1 WBFH Bloomfield Hills. Superintendent, we always appreciate your time.
It's always a pleasure talking to you anytime.
Thank you again. We're going to take a quick break here on the Megacast. Still a lot to get to in the second hour. When we come back, our good friend Curt Lawson from the West Bloomfield Police Department will join us on the show.
Hi, my name is Curt Lawson, and I'm the Public Information Officer for West Bloomfield Township. We wanted to reach out to you, our older adults, to provide information that you may find useful during this difficult time. We want to ensure you that West Bloomfield Town Hall, our Waters and Utility Department, West Bloomfield Parks, and our police and fire departments continue to work hard on your behalf. Information and resources can be found on the Township website, the police Facebook and Twitter, or call West Bloomfield Park's COVID-19 Help Hotline. Please remember to keep your social distance of at least 6 feet, wear facial coverings when you leave your home, and wash your hands for at least 20 seconds with soap. These precautions will help keep you safe during these difficult times.
This may seem uncomfortable, but so is being hooked to an IV, sleeping in a hospital bed, and fighting for your life. When it comes to COVID-19, comfort is not as important as saving lives. Wearing a mask can greatly reduce the chance of spreading the virus. So mask up, Michigan, every time you leave home.
Welcome back to the second hour of the Megacast. I'm Ronnie Dahl here in the studios alongside Tyler Keith. Just as a reminder, you can always catch us on Civic Center TV, Birmingham Area Municipal Access. If you have cable, thank you so much, because a portion of your bill does help support programming such as this. If you have Comcast, you can tune us in on channel 1599 on AT&T. You can also listen to us on the radio, 89.3 Lakes FM, 88.1 FM The Biff, and then of course today we are also live streaming today's edition of the show on the Greater West Bloomfield Chamber of Commerce Facebook page, and we want to say thank you to them. A year into this, Tyler, and people are still asking me, what exactly is the Megacast? And of course, we are able to utilize TV, radio, and social media to be able to bring you this show each and every day.
Yeah, we use all the available outlets to us, multiple TV stations in multiple areas, radio in multiple areas in Oakland County, so we can try our best to reach every area of the county, not only in who we speak to, but where we broadcast also.
Hey, great conversation always with Ken Gutman, the superintendent over at Walled Lake Consolidated Schools. But I will say, Tyler, I think we need a therapy dog.
We do. I think that would be very nice over here at Civic Center TV.
Right? Trixie won't be that dog because Trixie is still learning to get along with people outside of Woody and myself. But she's a rescue dog, so she's still in training. But when I worked for ATF, we had a chocolate lab. Her name was Bonnie. And ATF, of course, you know, they're explosives dogs. They're so highly trained.
Yes.
But Bonnie, at the same time, was a lab. Very energetic. And her handler used to get so mad at me because I would buy her toys. Because he would put her in the crate.
Of course.
And then she'd be sitting there next to his desk, no bed, no toys. And so I would constantly bring her toys, and you'd hear her squeak, 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 squeak.
Oh, yeah.
Between that and all the cookies, little dog snacks every time. He couldn't control Bonnie around me. He'd get so mad at me. Hey, speaking of law enforcement, let's bring in our good friend Curt Lawson. He is the Deputy Chief for the West Bloomfield Police Department. Thank you again for being with us.
Anytime. Great to be here.
I think you guys need a therapy dog.
Actually, probably get down the road, but one of the things in my multiple hats that I wear with youth assistants is we're talking about purchasing a dog for West Bloomfield School District. So it's pretty exciting. Maybe the new middle school that's going in would be a kind of a new addition to what they have to offer for students.
Oh, that would be a great program over there. You can talk to the superintendent, Walled Lake, about how well their program is working. So they're going to be getting more dogs as well. And it just makes people happier.
Absolutely. I think it's, there's so much stress right now with the COVID. Everyone's been locked up. The things that we see in the national media and the local media, it's just stress, stress, stress. So having that outlet, having that calming puppy or dog next to you is something I think is very helpful for a lot of people.
So with that, too, Curt, if we could talk a little bit about the stress. We're a year into this. How are members of your team doing over there?
I think overall our team is doing rather well, and that, like we've mentioned so many times before, that goes back to the immense community support that we have here in West Bloomfield. So the officers aren't feeling quite the pressure that I think other law enforcement officers are feeling across the country. They kind of feel like it's everyone against them, which is so unfortunate, because we can only be successful if we're partners with our community and we have legitimacy. And I think a lot of police departments, they're feeling that their backs are against the wall. And some of it is our own doing and some of it isn't. But here in West Bloomfield, I think our officers feel like they're very well supported. They're very well funded. And all in all, even though there's a pandemic going on, we're doing okay.
Yeah, but we did have the situation this week in Colorado, an active shooter situation in which 10 people were killed. When you see those headlines, what goes through your mind and your heart as a fellow law enforcement officer?
Well, I think, first of all, we need to understand that those types of situations can happen anywhere. And we recognize that they can happen even in relatively safe West Bloomfield. So we have definitely trained our officers, and we are prepared if that circumstance would rear its ugly head here in West Bloomfield, that would be able to respond effectively to that. But we're constantly training and talk to our officers about what our expectations are and how they respond to that. And what we've seen since Columbine is we've seen that the first officers on the scene, or in the case of the Boulder, Colorado, the first officer on the scene has got to gather his equipment very quickly. He's got to go into that scene to try to neutralize the assailant, because every second that goes by, there's more and more people are getting injured and killed. So we have to take the fight to the individual, the perpetrator, and that's what we're trained to do.
In so many of these situations, it's like you said, it's those seconds and those minutes, and it can take a while to get a team there. One of the good things I think that your department is good about, though, is not just reacting to calls, but also working with the community as well. That community engagement is a big part of what your department does.
It's essential. And you look at 21st century policing that was kind of brought about during the Obama administration, and they talked about how important legitimacy is and that community partnership. And I think really West Bloomfield is one of those townships, one of those police departments that does that very, very well. And we see how effective it is with the number of cases that we solve and the crime rate, which is, quite frankly, quite low.
And has the crime rate dipped during COVID here in the West Bloomfield area?
You know what? Our volume of dispatch runs definitely went down. And I think our officers, quite frankly, after the Floyd incident, were kind of laying low. So the number of runs that we had, the number of criminal complaints that we had were less. But now that we're starting to move out of the pandemic a little bit, that we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, our numbers are going back where they were prior to the pandemic.
So I will say a shout out to members of your team over there. I know that anytime they have the vaccination clinic over at the fire department on Orchard Lake, your department sits out there as well with lights in their squad cars just to alert people to the traffic that is out there. But as someone who gets to witness people getting the vaccine, and you're hoping that it's on the backside of this pandemic, what is the mental aspect for members of your team?
Well, I think the question is a personal one for a lot of our members. Is do they want to get a relatively new vaccine? They're somewhat concerned at times about, was the proper research done? And we try to convince them all the information that we have, the information we get from the CDC, that these are in fact effective and safe vaccines. But I think with a lot of our members, there's a little bit of doubt, or at least some of our members, of whether they should get that vaccine, especially for the female officers that are, childbearing years. So it's a personal choice. We just doing our best here as far as the administrative staff to try to keep everyone safe.
Curt Lawson with us here on the Megacast. He's the Deputy Chief for the West Bloomfield Police Department. We're going into springtime. We talk about this all the time, crimes of opportunity, and I will say, I do it even though I know I shouldn't. Working in the yard yesterday, you go around back and you leave the garage door open. It's like inviting people to come steal.
It's so true. And I do the same thing at my house, and I should not be doing that. I should know better. I do know better. When I worked surveillance back in my earlier years, I worked for a county task force. We would follow some criminals around that we knew were doing these things, and we would watch them just cruise around neighborhoods and look for people that would leave their front door open, where they'd be, raking leaves in the back or cutting the grass, and they would just, venture in the house and pillaging through the house looking for valuables. So there are individuals out there doing this, and you got to be aware that, like I said earlier, it can happen anywhere.
It can, and it does as well. Lock your doors, close your doors. It's some of the most basic things, but yet we all fall victim. But I do feel better knowing that you do that as well.
We all make mistakes, but unfortunately, sometimes you learn the hard way, right? So you come in from cutting the grass and you realize that someone's been in your home, or someone's been in your car because you left it unlocked and your wallet's in there, or your cell phone. We see that on a daily basis.
I remember back when I had a convertible, I would purposely leave it unlocked because I didn't want anyone to cut the top to get into the car. So I'm like, look, here's some change. If you're going to steal, take my change, but do not cut the top of the car because it costs so much money to get it replaced. So a little back thinking there. But I also made sure I didn't leave anything in the car. Curt Lawson with us here. He's the Deputy Chief, of course, for the West Bloomfield Police Department. Can we talk a little bit more? I saw Channel 4 recently did a story with you guys about your peer-to-peer program. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so we're super excited about this program. It's one of the areas where we kind of do a self-assessment here within the police department. One of the areas that we felt we were deficient. We really weren't taking care of our people as far as whole wellness, and that's physical wellness as well as a mental health wellness. And even officers here in West Bloomfield, we see quite a bit of trauma, and over time that trauma builds up, and that can lead to physical ailments, mental health issues, and unfortunately, like we see on a national level, suicides. So we wanted to put a program in place where we could get our officers the help that they may need and also be able to identify quickly if we see a potential problem on the horizon and get them the help that they need.
And this is so important to actually start to talk about mental health, because we do know in law enforcement, so many times people do not want to seek the help when it comes to mental health issues. And one of those also the concern from the backlash from their fellow officers, but also the potential of being deemed possibly unfit or being worried about their job and that security because of carrying a gun. So do you think that stigma is starting to go away in law enforcement, or is it still a long way and a lot of work to go?
Well, I'm happy to report that I think with our younger members of our department that there really isn't a stigma, that they have no issues asking for help and going to seek help, which is great. Because I said this on the WDIV interview in 1994 when I started. If you would see something traumatic, the older officers would say, suck it up. This is what you signed up for. But what they didn't realize is that that's why we, in 2019, had 237 officer suicides in the United States. That you can't keep those emotions and those feelings buried. That there has to be a way for you to vet those feelings, to talk about those feelings. And that's what's so great about this peer support team that we started back in January. And even though it's completely confidential and I have no idea who exactly has spoken to our peer support team, it's my understanding that it's been used quite a bit, which makes us feel great about the direction we're headed.
With us now, Curt Lawson, Deputy Chief over at the West Bloomfield Police Department. Just a couple more minutes here with you on the show. Curt, I love what you guys are doing now on your social media, where you guys are starting to interview one another to talk to the public. What's been the response?
I think the response has been positive. I think we just are looking for every avenue possible to connect as effectively as possible with our community. And one of the things I think we need to do is explain to our community what we do within the police department. We have amazing capabilities for a township police department here, and that's because of the great funding we get from our residents and township board. We're very effective and successful at what we do, and I want to highlight that. I want to market that, and so we're just looking for different platforms to be able to do that.
You guys going to do any TikTok videos? We want to see you dance.
We started down that TikTok path, but then there was the talk about, China, and we didn't want it somehow to get into our firewalls, and it kind of freaked the chief out a little bit, and then he gave me that look he gives once in a while with the big eyebrow, and I said, okay, we're going to hold off on that for right now.
But some officers have really been able to get a large following because of their TikTok videos. I will say I'm on it, but I've never posted anything, because once you start watching these videos, you go down a rabbit hole.
No, I agree. It's a great way to connect with a whole lot of people. How many people in West Bloomfield are on TikTok? I'd like to know what those stats are, because a lot of times when you venture too far out of your geographic area, you're kind of inviting some people in that want to have some different conversations. So we're really trying to be as effective as possible in connecting with our community and the surrounding greater West Bloomfield area.
I think we need a peer support group of young kids to help us with our social media.
Well, that's why I definitely talk to our younger officers. The person that's most responsible for our social media is Officer James Pettinato. He's one of our younger officers. He does a fabulous job on a day-to-day basis, but he's always researching new ways to connect with people. So that's what you need, is you need that younger generation that's more familiar with the technology.
You know what would be fun, though, is to put an old school typewriter in front of them and say, use that. No whiteout.
My daughter actually mentioned me the other day, she goes, I want to buy a typewriter. I'm like, why? And it's just kind of a cool thing. Like, she's never even seen one. So
isn't that crazy? They do actually make you put your iPad in it and it looks like the pad. You can type on it like an old school typewriter, but it's actually connected to your iPad. So maybe get her one of those.
think we're starting to show our age just a little bit in this conversation.
I know. Curt Lawson with us here. He's the Deputy Chief for the West Bloomfield Police Department. Anything maybe we didn't touch on that you want to share before we say goodbye?
No, I think that's it. I've done a lot of outreach lately through our social media, talking about fraud and just letting people know that this is just a really big deal. And we're seeing some individuals that are losing thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars to frauds. And it's just from simple phone calls from our fraudsters and our scammers that are kind of hooking our residents in on these scams. And it's costing a great deal of money. And of course, for us, manpower, it's just a huge investment to try to investigate these. And we'll do it for a period of a month, 2 months, where we're investigating these crimes. And then we'll find out that, it's coming from the UK or from India or South Africa. So we just want our residents to remember that no legitimate police agency or no legitimate business is going to ask for your personal information, your bank account number over the phone. And they're certainly not going to ask you to go to the local Walgreens or Rite Aid to buy them gift cards.
Always a good reminder. Plus, we have tax season coming up, and I would imagine there will be an increased number of attempts as well during this time.
Absolutely.
Curt Lawson, always great having you. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's great to see you guys.
We're going to take a quick break here on the Megacast. When we come back, Pamela Good from Beyond Basics will be joining us on the show. This is the Oakland County Megacast.
The only way to beat COVID-19 is to face it.
You can't get too comfortable.
You can't forget the danger.
Wear the mask.
Wear the mask.
Wear the mask. Wash your hands.
Keep a safe distance.
Especially in the next few months.
We'll get back to normal.
We'll get back to normal.
We'll get back to normal.
Someday.
But not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
But not yet.
But not yet.
Consider virtual gatherings for the holidays.
Curbside food orders.
Grocery delivery.
And shopping local.
Shop local.
And especially shopping local.
Let's beat this virus. We can if we face it together.
Together.
Together. Together.
Together.
Together.
Together.
Together. Together.
Together.
Together.
For the latest information, visit oakgov.com/COVID.
Michigan, the coronavirus pandemic has put us all to the test. And now it's time to put COVID-19 to the test. As we move forward, testing will be critical. We encourage anyone who has reason to get tested to do so, those with symptoms and those without. If you are leaving home and going back to work, get tested. If you think you may have COVID-19 or you've been exposed recently through family, friends, or coworkers, get tested. Our test locator tool can help you find the right testing site that fits your needs. Even if you're looking for easy access with no cost, no prescription, and no appointment necessary, we've got you covered. Help Michigan move forward, not backward. To find a testing site or learn more, visit michigan.gov/coronavirus test. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Great to have you with us here on the Megacast, the Wednesday edition of the show. For those that maybe are unable to tune into the entire show, we want to let you know you can always catch the full Megacast on civiccentertv.com. Just click on Megacast, or if you click on the on-demand section, you can find just the individual interviews as well. I'm so worried about the kids right now and the learning loss throughout COVID-19 and the pandemic, but also, how do we catch them up if need be? Because we know that for so many kids, this is a tough time. Learning virtually can be a challenge. With us now, let's go ahead and bring in Pamela Good. She is the president from Beyond Basics, a nonprofit focused on getting our kids reading. Thank you so much for being with us again.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for having us.
Before we get into talking about the op-ed in the Detroit News, give us a little bit of background for those that maybe aren't aware of your organization and your mission.
Yes, well, we're a nonprofit organization, literacy focused, We've done the majority of our work in Detroit public schools and some charter schools there. We've really worked with kids who are farthest behind in reading and have figured out a way to get them reading at grade level in about 6 weeks. And so with that, we've just continued to reach more kids.
So with that, what are you seeing right now in the middle of the pandemic when it comes to kids and reading loss?
Well, I think that with many things during COVID is that it's highlighting our weaknesses. And, I think that it's highlighted immediate needs of families who probably struggle every day and aren't on our radar. It's highlighted technology shortages. It's also highlighted literacy, because it's much more difficult to hide out one-on-one on a screen than it is in a classroom with kids when you don't read as well as them. And so the real question, I think, is once we've seen all of this, what are we as people going to do about it?
And this is not a parent issue. This is really a community issue. So how do you get people engaged and wanting to address this problem?
I think knowing about it is the first step, and that people are aware. But we really have had and have currently many people struggling in our communities. And I know that it's in all of us. I mean, we light up when we can help someone, and there are many people in need. And so I really do hope that people will step out of their comfort zone and jump into some of these areas and just do what they can to walk alongside people. And as it relates to literacy, that means advocating for it, funding it, being a tutor.
So with that, how can people get involved? Can they volunteer right now, because so many things are still closed down?
Yeah, so volunteering, not so much, but our tutors are actually paid staff. They're employed by Beyond Basics. It's an hour a day, 5 days a week with the student, some administrative work along with that. So I would say they can be trained as tutors and work from home right now, because our tutoring is online.
I love that you are passionate about this issue, because it can be hard for so many of the teachers to identify the students that need the help when they're in the classroom. And now you put them virtually, and we do know so many of the kids are so much more tech savvy than we are as adults, so they're better at hiding some of these issues instead of getting the help that they need. How much of this is a funding issue as well, to try to get more teachers in the classrooms?
Yeah, so I think that you have this illiteracy issue impacting education has gone on for decades. And the results of it are today, 85% of the kids attending Detroit public schools do not read well enough to really access their grade level, education.
That's a shocking number. That is a shocking number.
And it's not a new number. This number has been out there since the last national report was in 2005. So this isn't a new number. And I think that I call it a silent epidemic. We have a lot of good intentions, but this has just slipped by. And the fact that we can get kids reading now at grade level on average in 6 weeks, we really need to embrace it. And so teachers in the classroom, if you have 85% of your kids that are not up to grade level in reading, how do you prepare them for the next year? So it's really an impossible situation. And so we have two things to do. We have to get all those kids that missed it reading as quickly as we can, and then we need to fix the educational model to include kids that are far behind.
So prior to the pandemic, sometimes getting people to change the way they operate, especially when we're dealing with unions as well, can be a challenge. But because of COVID, so many conversations are open and change is being forced upon people. Do you think now it makes it a good time to make this a priority, to change then fix the system?
I think it's a great time, one, because you have everybody looking at these problems, and this literacy impacts so many other issues. once you get a child literate, they can now take advantage of those educational dollars and succeed in life. So it impacts many, many things. But I think one of the things that's happening right now is that we have all this funding pouring into the state for COVID-related, CARES Act money. But these dollars definitely could move towards solving this problem in all of these districts. And it's going to empower communities if we use it in that way.
Pamela Good with us here on the Megacast. She's the president for Beyond Basics. Tell us about House Bill 4480.
Well, you're talking about the $94 million. Yes. So there's so many House bills going around.
It's hard to keep up with them, right?
But, that is literacy lawsuit money. And with that settlement, the students represented in it were given, awarded, I guess you could say, $40,000 each. And then there was a group of dollars that was given to go to help the district. And so that legislation is in front of the legislature right now. And I believe it has great support on both sides of the aisle. And it really, I would love to see it go towards literacy in the Detroit community who needs it more. There are many more kids there that need it. So I'm in favor of it. And I hope that it actually makes its way to get kids reading.
How do we take when we hear these things and we get that money? Let's say it does pass, they get the money. So many times the kids don't really benefit as much as they should because that piece of the pie, by the time it gets down to where it needs to be, has dwindled so much. How can we ensure that this money actually supports the kids and we can see the results and they get the help that they need?
I think that instead of sending these resources to the kids that are just a little bit behind, I don't know how to say it more clear than that. That's where all the interventions are right now. These dollars should go to children who are farthest behind. And it would be an organization like ours that is doing one-on-one intensive tutoring. Anything short of one-on-one intensive, and I mean an hour a day, 5 days a week, isn't going to move the needle for these children, and they would just be left lagging and pass behind. So I think it needs to be used strategically, not just literacy as a blanket, word. Literacy can be giving a child a book, or it can be doing this intensive work. And we need the intensive work to be done so all those kids can read books.
So tell us more about how your program actually works as well. What makes it different?
Yeah, so we do assess every child before we begin tutoring. It's so important to know how far behind they are and where they need help. And then we pair that child with a trained, certified tutor. They work an hour a day, one-on-one, 5 days a week, anywhere from 4 to 14 weeks. So the kids that are farthest behind have more weeks. But that is the recipe for getting any child reading.
If I can ask you, what made you become such an advocate for kids in the Detroit public schools?
I delivered coats one day. You remember that story. And my heart was just open to a community that seemed to need everything. And I did not know about the literacy crisis when I delivered coats, or even it took like 4 years before I realized the kids couldn't read. I was really just trying to do the best I can to help people who seemed like they needed everything. And those were academic enrichment programs in the school. I was putting coats on kids. And I think that that's the challenge for all of us, just wherever we are, to step out and help someone. And it's amazing. I did not have a vision for all of this when I left the school that day. I think when you step out with good intentions for others and yourself, that it takes you someplace, you didn't expect, and hopefully a good.
Well, we are all happy that you happened to stop by that school that day to deliver coats, because it has led to this. What's been the biggest impact on you and some of the kids you've been able to help?
Well, I think the biggest thing, the kids that we help, to watch a child wake up to words and know that the rest of their life is going to be different and better, and that their children will be readers is huge. I mean, that's the reason we do this, to change the direction of that life and to empower them. But in my own life, I think that my own spiritual growth has been the biggest impact. When you take on something that's much bigger than yourself, you need the Almighty Lord and Savior to help you out. And so I've, there have been mountains, peaks that we've seen kids reading, and those are the great days. But there have been many days where I've been on my knees just praying that we can get to the next day. And so that growth, relying on God outside of myself to help, is really, for my personal journey, has made all the difference.
It's the faith. You operate on faith.
Yeah, faith and courage. Those two. Yes.
I think so many people would really be surprised to understand and to learn just how big of a problem this is.
Oh, my goodness. Illiteracy, I believe, is connected to almost every social ill in America. And it's created such a problem that we haven't been able to take care of so many others in need that really need it. Think about this. We're taking people who are capable and we're forcing them to live in a social service system that doesn't function well. And it gets in the way for us really taking care of those that aren't capable, that we need to take better care of. And we're at a crossroads in our nation, I believe, to decide what we're made of. And are we that person that's going to inconvenience ourselves to help someone else? And the jury's out on that. I believe in us. I see so many good-natured people, generous people, inspired, positive people, that I think that we're at a turning point to a better day, a better normal. And that's my hope, and that keeps me going also.
Well, that is, you are a lady who gets things done, and we are all grateful to have you. And we should note that I saw a documentary recently, and they talked about how many people that are sitting in our jails and our prisons, a lot of it is connected to them and their inability to be able to read and to read at a functioning level in our community and our society. So this does impact all of us.
Yes, and I'm happy to answer that, but I do have to say that I don't get it all done. I have a phenomenal team. I have phenomenal supporters, and we have thousands of people that help us, and so collectively we are moving the needle forward. But on the area that you've talked about, those incarcerated, and even our juveniles in juvenile centers, it's like 85% illiteracy. We know that not solving this for decades has created these institutions that are housing people that if they were literate, they would not be there. And so I see K-12 education as the jump start, but that we do need to send tutors to do one-on-one work, either in person or virtual, to our juvenile centers and to our jails. And it will lessen all of that. And then all those people are part of society helping us take care of those that really need us to take care of them. And so you're absolutely right about that. Most people don't talk about that.
Pamela Good with us here. She's the president from Beyond Basics. How can people find out more about your organization and also getting involved in your mission?
Yes. So beyondbasics.org. Go to our website. You can call our office. I think our contact information is there. I would say advocate. Kids in your own community struggle with reading. That is the problem. And if you can sponsor kids reading, you can do that on the website. And if you want to become a tutor, we need more and more tutors. So we'd be happy to have help in any of those areas.
Well, thank you so much again for being with us. We always appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate being able to speak out.
Pamela Good with us. She's the president for Beyond Basics. We're going to take a quick break here on the Megacast.
Perry tested positive for COVID-19. Emma was exposed to a friend who's positive. Willa's waiting on test results. After any contact with COVID-19, or if you test positive, stay home for at least 10 days. If you live with others, keep your distance and wear a mask. Help Michigan contain COVID-19. Visit michigan.gov/containcovid.
Hi, my name is Curt Lawson, and I'm the Public Information Officer for West Bloomfield Township. We wanted to reach out to you, our older adults, to provide information that you may find useful during this difficult time. We want to ensure you that West Bloomfield Town Hall, our Waters and Utility Department, West Bloomfield Parks, and our police and fire departments continue to work hard on your behalf. Information and resources can be found on the Township website, the police Facebook and Twitter, or call West Bloomfield Park's COVID-19 Help Hotline. Please remember to keep your social distance of at least 6 feet, wear facial coverings when you leave your home, and wash your hands for at least 20 seconds with soap. These precautions will help keep you safe during these difficult times.
As rivals, we don't always see eye to eye.
Like who scored the best recruits?
Who's gonna be who?
And whether we wear green or blue.
But one thing we can all agree on to help stop the spread of COVID-19. Wear a mask.
Wear a mask.
Wear a mask.
Wear a mask. Wear a mask.
The ball's in your court, Michigan.
Welcome back to the Megacast. Just about 20 minutes left here in the Wednesday edition of this show. Asian Americans report the biggest increase in serious incidents of online hate and harassment during the COVID-19 pandemic. It's about 17%, up from 11% last year. To talk more about this and so many other things, let's bring in Laura Misomi. She's the Executive Director for Rising Voices of Asian American Families. Thank you again for being with us.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
If we can just start off, tell us a little bit more about the organization.
Yeah, certainly. So Rising Voices of Asian American Families was founded in 2019. We actually only brought on paid staff right before the pandemic, right before everything kind of shut down. And our goal and mission is really to increase the civic engagement, community organizing, and leadership development for Asian American women here in the state. We do a lot of work on elections, so voting rights work, as well as trying to build community and create space for Asian American women to really talk about things that they've not really had opportunity to talk about before.
Response from the public throughout this path that you're taking?
I mean, I think for us, we know that there's a huge demand, there's a huge need for this type of organization and the work that we are doing. I would say that kind of in traditional civic engagement space, you see a lot of men as a general matter, but even more for Asian American women. So I think for us, it's really important that we raise our voices. I think particularly because of the stereotypes of Asian American women as being kind of meek and quiet. And I think especially now in this current time, it's really important for us to use our voices.
And, you know, it's really sad that it takes a tragedy for us to start talking about this on a national level. Of course, the shooting of 8 people in Atlanta recently. How does an incident like that open doors for you to have these important conversations?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think one thing that is clear over the last year since the start of the pandemic, I think we have seen a huge increase in the number of incidences of folks using xenophobic, anti-Chinese language to describe the coronavirus. And we see the shootings in Atlanta as kind of being yet another example of kind of the culmination of this anti-Asian American hate. And we would also say, too, you know, it is tragic that it takes an atrocity like this to kind of remind people of the history, the long history of anti-Asian hate and racism and the way that white supremacy shows up in the Asian American community, and particularly on Asian American women as well.
One of the great things about coming together as women and Asian women is trying to get more people in these elected leader positions. Tell us what that effort has been like behind the scenes to try to get more people elected. I love it, too, because you're young. We need young people engaged in our political process.
Yeah, I think we're trying to create that pipeline. We're trying to expand the narrative of what is possible for Asian American women to achieve. I think there is the very pernicious model minority stereotype where a lot of Asian Americans are kind of pegged as being good at math or science and kind of being pushed by parents to go into like a high value engineering lawyer type of position. And we're trying to make sure that being part of social change and social good is a viable path, especially for us, because more of our voices need to be in those positions and at the table where decisions are being made. We're lucky in that, on our board of directors, we have 2 elected officials, State Senator Stephanie Chang and also Macomb County Commissioner Mai Zhang. And so we're really proud to have their leadership and guidance, and also be able to say, these are role models. These are people who have progressive values. They're staying true to that, and they've also been able to achieve elected office. And so we're trying to, create those pathways and pipelines for other Asian American women.
How much of a challenge has it been over the past year because of the pandemic? You can't get out right now and knock door to door and have those conversations at fairs and community events like we used to be able to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a huge challenge. I think in particular, we wanted to create space that was more culturally appropriate for Asian American women to gather. So we did a lot of community building potlucks in people's homes, et cetera, rather than just having a public meeting in the town hall or something like that. And I think during the pandemic, what made it even harder too is that we also know there's an unequal burden placed on women to be caregivers. So we have a lot of API moms who are working, who are trying to manage homeschooling their children, caring for elderly family members, et cetera. And so we know that all of this has been kind of compounding how challenging it can be to do organizing in this atmosphere.
We're talking with Laura Misumi. She's the executive director for the Rising Voices of Asian American Families. During this time, too, though, it is Women's History Month. Who do you look up to? Who's been a mentor for you?
I mean, I think I mentioned previously, right, our board member, State Senator Stephanie Chang, she's always done an amazing job of both paving the way, but then also leaning back and looking back and offering that helping hand to people who are coming up behind. So she's amazing. It's great to be able to work with her on a regular basis. I think also Yuri Kochiyama, for me personally, I'm Japanese American, I'm 4th generation, and my whole family was incarcerated during World War II. And so seeing Yuri Kochiyama have experienced that herself and then come out the other side, working to build bridges and work in solidarity with the Black community in New York is something that's incredibly inspiring to me, and something that we're trying to do here as well, making sure that the struggles that Asian Americans are experiencing right now, this atrocity, is placed in the context of how white supremacy shows up in other communities as well.
So, and with that, I know that as a nonprofit, you're trying to continue this work. What does the next year look like ahead for you and your members?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, we're trying to center healing justice, acknowledging that a lot of people are experiencing these atrocities in different ways. People feel grief, the anxiety, the tensions, and so we want to make sure that we're holding space for that and offering resources. So we are holding a healing session this Saturday at 11 a.m. for Asian American identified folks. We're also partnering with Detroit Action for a Black, Indigenous, people of color healing space on April 10th as well. And so that kind of grounds a lot of our work. We want to continue to organize, continue to build with like-minded Asian American women who are interested in doing this work. We're going to be doing more voter registration, more GOTV stuff for municipal elections later in the summer and fall, gearing up for next year. We're also hoping to do more organizing with Asian American moms and getting a better sense of what the impact of COVID has been on their lives.
Oh, COVID. Now that we have a different president in office, because we do know President Trump would often say about COVID, it was the China virus. How much do you think that hurt your efforts in trying to move Asian Americans forward in this country?
It definitely hurt, right? I think like we have a phone banking operation. We've called into Asian American communities across the state of Michigan just to get a sense of how folks are doing, trying to offer support. And we've heard a lot of comments of folks who are afraid to go to the grocery store, who are afraid to go outside. Maybe they live in a predominantly white community and just didn't know, how they would be received. And I think that those anxieties were certainly heightened because of the comments coming from the president, yes, but also from a number of elected officials on both sides. I think, we had, State Senator, Senate Majority Leader Mike Shirkey, kind of doubling down on using comments, calling it the China virus. And I think that to fail to see the impact that those words have and kind of obvious consequence of using that type of language, dehumanizing the Asian American community, making Asian Americans feel less like they belong, that compounded with misogyny on Asian American women, the history of the criminalization of sex work, it leads to incidences like what happened in Atlanta. And so we still call on all elected officials to be really cognizant of the language that they're using. Meet with us, meet with the Asian American community to learn how to do better.
Social media has been such a big platform to raise your voice and to raise awareness on this issue. How have you been able to utilize social media to get your message out, especially now because we're all online?
Yeah, definitely. It's been really helpful in a lot of ways, too, because I think what you've seen coming out of more mainstream coverage of this incident, particularly in Atlanta, is just a lot of focus on the shooter, trying to humanize him, trying to dive deeply into his mindset, as opposed to doing what we believe to be the most important, which is centering the most impacted. And so for us to be able to use our social media platform to raise that and to say, as we center the most impacted, let's make sure that everything that we're doing from now on, any kind of policy, call to action, is focused on those victims, those most impacted. And for us, too, to be able to use social media to elevate the work of other amazing organizations like Red Canary Song and others, Answer Detroit in particular, to kind of highlight this intersection with the issue of the criminalization of sex work in particular, that's something that's really important to us as well.
Yeah, that's been a long discussion when it comes to sex workers. Too often you're picking up the women and not the men. Mm-hmm. And so that is a conversation that needs to continue on. And hopefully by having organizations such as yours, we can come together and bring this a platform and get people elected into office that can take up these issues and make a change. But it's also about how do we break down and change these stereotypes from everything from Hollywood. You look at the movies, you look at Lifetime. Mm-hmm. How do we change the stereotypes overall?
Yeah, that's a huge thing. I think that for us, one thing that we would call upon our white and other folks of color allies to really, in your own life, whenever there's an instance, say, of friends who are making a China doll, or like, we love you long time, like these types of comments that come up a lot that have been, part of my growing up, my history too, not standing by and letting that happen. Being able to call that out immediately and be able to say, like, that's messed up, or have a real conversation with someone about why they feel like it's appropriate to say comments like that. Those types of interpersonal things are really important to make sure that people just start having a little bit more reflection on why they have these views.
And with that, too, how do you have those conversations when people say things and they're not meaning it to be mean, but more out of curiosity? My niece is Asian, and she is constantly being asked, "What are you?" So how do you have these conversations and do it in a way to educate people? But, and not leave them, she doesn't know how to address that. She's like, what do you mean, what am I? I'm American.
Yeah, I think that resonates deeply with me, and I'm sure it would resonate a lot with your Asian American audience as well. I think, for one thing, it is about what does it mean for folks to do their own work and educate themselves on the history of Asian Americans in this country? My family's been in this country for over 110 years. You know, we've been here. We've been a part of the fabric of this country. There's so many resources available. So I think for first and foremost, what does it mean for us to have a fully funded education system with a well-rounded, diverse curriculum that gives folks the tools and resources to learn about other people that maybe they don't see every day? I think patience and the willingness to be wrong, the willingness to ask questions and be not afraid of asking these questions of your friends and family who you trust is really important as well. I think also a reminder, it puts a huge burden on Asian Americans and all Black and brown folks too, to have to be the ones to kind of do the educating. And so, you know, huge props to your niece. I feel for her because it is really challenging. And I think it is about being able to make sure that the question gets turned. You know, how come you think that, you know, why do you ask me that question? What makes you think that I'm not American? You know, what about this situation kind of makes you feel like you can ask me that question? I'm curious because what it's really trying to get to at the bottom of is, what is your underlying assumption about who gets to be American and what does an American look like? And so being able to try to encourage children especially to start questioning those assumptions, being more open-minded, and just, you know, continue to have those conversations with your children if your children happen to be the ones who are asking the Asian in their class, what are you or where are you from, you know?
Right. And, you know, a lot of it starts with our textbooks. You know, we forget that history was written mainly from the viewpoint of a white male. And so we have huge chunks of our history that hasn't been documented and shared and passed along generation after generation.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. You know, I was born in San Francisco, grew up in Massachusetts, came out to U of M for undergrad, and I remember being in an Asian American literature class where a classmate who went to school in Michigan was saying, you know, oh, I'd never heard of being at Japanese American incarceration camps during World War II. And here's someone whose family, you know, had gone through it. And I think, you know, we get maybe a line, a paragraph, something that does not even begin to address the complexities of that history and the racism that caused it. And I think that, you know, that's something that we really need to be critical of, supporting fully funding education, being able to hire more diverse teachers who are able to kind of raise these things, make sure that we're getting books written by authors of color, et cetera, into the curriculum is absolutely critical to making sure people have a better understanding of what American history really is.
Well, Laura, tell us again, how can people find out more about the event that's coming up?
So we are having a healing circle for Asian American identified folks, and you can go to bit.ly/Rising Voices Healing, and I'll make sure to send that too, in case you need it in writing, and find out more about us on Facebook at Rising Voices AAF. Rising Voices of Asian American Families is the name of our organization. We're always looking to interact with folks on Facebook or Instagram. So thanks so much for having me.
And I know that volunteering is kind of hard right now due to the pandemic. Do you guys need volunteers? What does that side look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're always looking for more folks to get involved. We're lucky in the sense that being able to pivot digitally this year has meant that we've been able to expand our geographic reach. Most of our staff is based in Southeast Michigan, but we're always trying to reach more folks who are a little bit farther out. So, you know, we do have some volunteer opportunities that will be coming up later in the year for sure, but we're always looking for folks to engage with us in different ways. So please feel free to reach out.
And if I can just mention, because of the pandemic and everyone being online, have you found that you have been able to connect with more people because so many people are doing everything virtually right now?
Yes, I think, you know, it's been a real blessing and a curse because I think we all know that having face-to-face interactions is really the best way to get to know someone and build that relationship. But on the other hand, you know, being in Detroit, it's hard to imagine how we would have been able to have built relationships with, you know, the Burma Center in Battle Creek or meeting young people in East Kentwood High or something on the west side of the state without being able to be virtual. So it's been a blessing and a curse, I guess.
So, well, we're glad that you stayed. following a University of Michigan. Go Blue?
Go Blue.
We like to say that just because Tyler is a Spartan.
It's okay.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Well, we're still in the tournament, both sides, women and men, so I'm watching for sure.
Exactly.
What'd you get your degree in?
Political science and Latin American and Caribbean studies.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, we so appreciate your time, and also thank you for the work that you're doing. I know that it can be challenging at times, but we need people such as yourself and the younger generation to continue this conversation, but also push for people to get involved in the political process. So, Laura, thank you again.
All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Just about another minute left here in the Megacast. One of the great things about this show, Tyler, is that we get to meet so many people from so many different organizations, really doing a lot of work here in the community.
Yeah, we do, and having important conversations too, and inspiring change. I mean, this is not an issue. The issue of Asian hate and violence against people of Asian American and Pacific Islander background is nothing new in this country, and in order for us to get past this issue and to end Asian hate, as has been the buzz phrase in the last week or so, is for people that look like you and I, that are white, people that are like me, a straight white man, to educate themselves and work with these communities to end the hate against them.
So again, you can find out more about them. Their website is risingvoicesaaf.org. That's pretty much going to wrap it up for the Wednesday edition of the Megacast. Tyler and myself will be back here bright and early tomorrow, starting at 10 a.m. here for the Thursday edition of the Megacast.